right, so today we're going to be continuing our conversation about multiplying polynomials. Okay, so here are some sample questions like we had yesterday on the worksheet. So hopefully you remember what it was you were supposed to do. You have parentheses, you have a number outside, that's distributive property. You distribute that number to everything inside the parentheses. Okay, so 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times 2 is 16. So we write 16b, 48 plus 16b, or better, we put it in standard form and say 16b plus 48. Okay. Then we continue. 2 times 6x, 2 times negative 3. So that would be 12x minus 6. All right, so I'm going to let you finish the rest of these, and you'll put your answer on your paper, and then that'll be part of the grade when you turn it in. Okay. So let's move on. So how can you multiply two polynomials? Well, we just saw when it's a monomial, right, we can just distribute it. But here's an example of two binomials being multiplied. Okay, and they're using a modeling of algebra tiles, and they said x plus 3. It's here x, and there's our 3's, 1, 2, 3, right? 3 of them. And here we have our x, and we have two negatives. So negative 1, which makes negative 2. All right, so when you multiply, right, these two form this shape, which hopefully you remember is called x squared. Okay. Then when you multiply the negative 1 times the x, you get negative x. So we have two of those. And when you multiply the x times the 1's, you get 1x. Okay. And so then here, when you multiply the negatives times the positives, you get negatives. Okay. So if we wrote down our answer here, we have one x squared term. We have 2 negative x's and 3 positive x. So if we use our zero pair rule, that's a zero pair, and that would be a zero pair. So we really just have x left. So plus x, positive x. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 negatives. So minus 6 would be our answer. All right, so here we have x and 1, so that's our 2x plus 1, and here we have x and negative 1, so that's our 2x minus 1. When we multiply these, the x's multiply together and gives us x squared. So we have 1x squared, another x squared, a third, and a fourth. So that means we have 4x squared. Then we have an x and an x and a negative x and a negative x, so that's going to 0, right? Because we have a negative with a positive, a negative with a positive, those are zeros. And then we're left with minus 1. So 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 1 is 4x squared minus 1. Okay. This says in parts C and D. There are no parts C and D, so don't worry about that. Okay. All right, let's move on. That's multiplying using algebra tiles. So what if we don't have algebra tiles? So what else can we do? Well, we have a couple of different choices, just as we did when we were multiplying a monomial times a binomial. Our first thing that we did was we distributed. So here we have two things being multiplied by two other things. So we could say we're going to do double distribution. We're going to take this first term, x, because it's in front of this parentheses, and we're going to multiply it times the two things inside the parentheses. And then we have this term, positive 2, and we're going to multiply it times both things inside the parentheses. So we would have x times x plus x times 5 plus 2 times x plus 2 times 5. So x times x, remember we add the exponent, so that'll be x squared. X times 5 is simply 5x. X times 2 is 2x, and 2 times 5 is 10. And then we see here in the center we have 5x and 2x. They're like terms, so we would add them together. So 5 plus 2 is 7, so if we get 7x. Final answer, x squared plus 7x plus 10. So that is one way. Then we call I refer to this as the distributive method of multiplying. Or there's another thing we can do, and it's similar to those algebra tiles that we just saw, where you draw a sort of a table or a box. Okay, and in our box we now have two terms being multiplied by two other terms. So we've got x plus 3 being multiplied by x minus 4. So we have to have 4 boxes because that's 4 multiplications. So we multiply x times x, and we add those exponents again, so that's going to be x to the second power. X times 3 will be 3x. X times negative 4 will be negative 4x. And negative 4 times negative 4 times positive 3 will be negative 12. And then we can see here in the middle, those are our like terms. So we're going to combine them and say negative 4 plus 3, and we get negative 1x. So that'll be negative x, and then we have our minus 12 and our positive x squared. Okay. So that's two forms of, or two different ways we can look at multiplication of binomials. All right. So here's another set. I'm kind of partial to the box. I like it better than distributive. But then there's a third way that we can do it, and this is our vertical method. So we have 2x minus 3 times x plus 5. And this is probably my least favorite way of doing it, but since some of you like vertical, I'm going to go ahead and show you how this one would work. So we multiply 5 times 3, and it's a negative 3, so that's going to be minus 15. Then we multiply 5 times 2x, and we get 10x. Okay, and then just like when you were in elementary school and you were multiplying this, when you go to the second place, you would leave a blank, or you'd put in a 0 here. Right? We're going to kind of do the same thing. This will be our 0, and then we'll multiply x times negative 3 and get minus 3x, and then x times 2x will be 2x squared. And then we add, so 2x squared has no like term, so we just bring it down. 10 plus negative 3 is positive 7x, and negative 15 plus 0 is negative 15. All right, so those are your three different ways of looking at polynomial multiplication. You're going to get to pick which one you want to use, so kind of knock yourself out on that. All right, so on A here, I want you to go ahead and multiply that out. Go ahead and pause the video and work it out, and then we'll talk again in a minute. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video and everything, because I'm just going to give you the answer. You should have arrived at x squared minus 9x plus 18. If you didn't, you probably want to ask for help. Okay. All right. Go ahead and work out letter B here. Pause the video. Okay, so after you've worked this out, hopefully you got the correct answer of 6x to the 4th power, because we've got 2 and 2, and then you would have had minus 7x squared, and then minus 5. Again, if you did not come up with that answer, ask for help. All right, let's take a look at another. Okay, and this one's a little bit more involved, because now we have x plus 5 times x squared minus 3x minus 2. So we have a binomial times a trinomial. So this is a little more work. I'm going to go ahead and show it to you using distributive method and the box method, and you can decide which you prefer on that. And I guess I'll go ahead and do vertical method too while we're at it. Okay, so if we do the distributive method, we're just going to take x times x squared, and we get x to the third. We take x times minus 3x, and we get negative 3x squared. Then we do x times minus 2, and we get minus 2x. Then we do with the 5. So 5 times x squared is plus 5x squared. 5 times minus 3x is minus 15x. And then 5 times minus 2 is negative 10. Then we look for our like terms. X to the third is the only one. Then we have an x squared and an x squared. We have an x and an x. And then minus 10 is its own thing. So we would have x cubed minus, nope, sorry, it's going to be plus because negative 3 plus 5 will give us positive 2x squared. Then minus 2 minus 15 is going to be minus 17x. And then we just write down the minus 10. Okay, so that's the distributive method of solving or multiplying. If we go with a box, okay, this time we're going to have 2 by 3. So we have a box set up like that, and we'll have x squared minus 3x minus 2, and we have x plus 5. So x times x squared is x to the third power. X times negative 3x is negative 3x squared. X times minus 2 is minus 2x. We have 5 times x squared, so 5x squared. 5 times negative 3x is negative 15x. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. And because I put my polynomials, or because my polynomials were in order and standard form, my like terms are here on the diagonals. Okay, so I still have x cubed. 5 minus 3 is 2x squared. Negative 2 minus 15 is negative 17x, and minus 10. Okay, so that's our box method. And then finally, if we wanted to do it vertically, we would put the longer polynomial on top, so x squared minus 3x minus 2, and then we multiply it times x plus 5. So 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. 5 times negative 3x is negative 15x. And 5 times x squared is 5x squared. Then we leave a blank or put a 0, and then we multiply x times negative 2, x times negative 3x, and x times x squared. And then we add them together, and we get x cubed plus 2x squared minus 17x minus 10. So hopefully you can see it does not matter which method you prefer. If you employ it correctly, you will get the correct answer. All right, so now you want to get started on Polynomials Day 3 worksheet.